Most Honorable Andrew Holness, along with the Minister of National Security, Dr. the Honorable Horace Chang, the Chief of Defense Staff, Lieutenant General Rocky Meade, and the Commissioner of Police, Major General Anthony Anderson. Please be seated.
Good morning, everyone. And please, well, firstly, let me wish for you all, and in particular the press, Happy New Year. It is still January, so I think I can safely do that. And let me also apologize for our late start. As you will know, the logistics behind the declaration of a state of emergency is not a simple one. And because so much rests on the documentation, we have to make doubly sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. And then, having done that, we have to do so again. And we made sure today to ensure that we had all our documentation in place. By now, the suspense that normally accompanies the declaration of states of public emergency is no more. This becomes a matter now that once we call a press conference for 9 a.m. on a Sunday, people know what it is. We have gotten a little better, I would say, particularly in how the security forces have developed the strategy for putting in place the states of public emergency. There are no leaks in the press or on social media before, and that is because we have developed a very good protocol. And not only that, I believe that the force, the JCF and the JDF, have fine-tuned their own internal operations to ensure that there is security and confidentiality around the information. So, on the advice of the Chief of Defense Staff and the Commissioner of Police, I have advised and petitioned His Excellency the Governor General to declare a state of public emergency in the Kingston Eastern Police Division. That was done at midnight, or a few seconds past midnight today. And therefore, a state of public emergency is now in effect. I will now ask the Chief of Defense Staff. Oh, sorry, the Commissioner of Police will go first. I'll now ask the Commissioner of Police to give details on the declaration.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The high level of violent crime being experienced within the boundaries of the Kingston Eastern Division in the parish of Kingston in the latter part of last year and since the start of this year is at a scale and of a nature such that it greatly endangers public safety. Eastern Kingston has persistently been one of the country's crime hotspots, with several gangs engaged in deadly inter- and intra-gang conflicts or other criminal enterprise. Today, there are currently 32 criminal gangs, with over 16 now actively engaged in various violent conflicts in the division. There are 33 wanted persons and another 34 violence influencers within the division. During 2019, Kingston Eastern recorded a concerning increase in violent crimes, especially shootings when compared with 2018. Murders increased by 16%, while shootings increased by 49%. 67% of these were attributed to gang-related activity. In 2019, we recovered 36 firearms along with 622 rounds of ammunition in East Kingston alone. Already, since the start of 2020, the Eastern Kingston Division has recorded 11 murders. when compared with the 3 during the corresponding period last year. When we examine the broader national picture, the year 2020 has begun with signs of success in the implementation of our policing strategies. Murder is down 5% when compared with this time last year overall, and shootings are down 7%. The gang warfare and other criminal acts perpetrated by gangs has created fear among citizens and has caused the disruption of livelihoods in several communities in the division. The fear that is associated with this level of violence has undermined the daily lives of these communities and the residents. As a consequence, and in consultation with the Chief of Defense Staff, we requested that a state of public emergency be declared in the Eastern Kingston Police Division. As has been demonstrated through previous and current states of emergency, this methodology has been very effective in reducing violent crime. By way of update, the limited states of public emergency continue to be successful in the other divisions in which they have been implemented. We have seen reductions in murders in Westmoreland and Hanover of 48% and 42% respectively when compared with the similar period prior to the declaration of the tri-parish SOE. Shootings are down in both parishes by 32% and 74% respectively. St. James, which has the longest running, is actually, shootings are down 5%. Murders are actually up by 7%, but it's trending down. This year, we are nearly finished with the month of January, and we've had 4 homicides in St. James for the whole month so far. In St. Andrews South, there has been a 16% drop in murders and a 27% drop in shootings when compared to the similar period before the state of emergency. In St. Catherine, murders are down 34%, with shootings down 41%. And in Clarendon, murders are down 63%, and shootings have declined by 73%. Let me reiterate that the implementation of emergency measures is never intended to be an alternative to other policing strategies. While we implement states of public emergency, we continue to advance strategies to reduce violent crime and increase public safety across all divisions, utilizing the range of policing tools. The Jamaica Constabulary Force continues to embark on its comprehensive program of transformation. We must continue to save the lives of our citizens and reduce the fear that families and communities feel when violence goes unchecked. We seek the support and cooperation of the residents and persons doing business in or transiting the declared area, and indeed all Jamaicans. There may be some traffic delays and inconvenience, but we ask for your patience and understanding. The public can assist by contacting Crime Stop at 311, which is, as always, completely confidential, by complying with the security officers at checkpoints, by adhering to curfew guidelines, and by notifying us at the JCF of any professional breaches of conduct by our own members. The JCF remains committed to respect for all, the rule of law, and being a force for good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As indicated by the Prime Minister, a state of public emergency was declared for the Kingston East Police Division. The following are the relevant boundaries. On the western side, the boundary extends in another direction from the intersection of Michael Manley Boulevard and South Kemp Road, then continues northeasterly along Vineyard Road to the end of Diana Drive. The northern boundary extends in an easterly direction from Diana Drive to Lexington Avenue, then onto Dinner Road to the intersection of Mountain View Avenue. The boundary then extends easterly to the shared parish border of St. Andrew and St. Thomas. The eastern boundary extends in a southerly direction along the shared parish boundary of St. Andrew and St. Thomas to the coastline. The southern boundary extends westerly along the coastline of St. Andrew, then along the Kingston coastline to the intersection of South Kemp Road and Michael Manley Boulevard. This morning, the Jamaica Defense Force and the Jamaica Constabulary Force deployed to sections of these communities ahead of the declaration of the state of emergency. The state of emergency will give the security forces temporary additional powers of search, arrest, detention, and limited suspension of individual rights. We believe that this is necessary in order to give the security forces the necessary space to carry out the operational tasks that will be required to help bring a sense of normalcy to the communities affected. While we acknowledge that persons may be concerned about the implications of the security operations on their everyday lives, we want to assure citizens that both the JDF and JCF have been properly trained and oriented to give due regard to basic human rights and citizen rights of all the persons within the community. We will continue the exemplary record we have demonstrated in other areas in which states of emergency have been declared to carry out our duties in a lawful and respectful manner. We urge persons to acquaint themselves with the regulations and the requirements governing states of emergency in order to easily and conveniently transit the areas they go about their lawful business. During this period of the state of emergency, citizens will encounter various operations, such as the very highly visible vehicle checkpoints. The purpose of these checkpoints is not to unnecessarily inconvenience citizens, but rather to add a robust element of security for residents as well as other citizens transiting the area. We ask that for ease and simplicity, as they approach checkpoints, citizens lower their windows and during dark periods turn on their roof lights. We also implore citizens that as they comply with the guidelines to transit the area, they should not slow down beyond what is reasonable just to observe the activities at the checkpoints, as this may cause unnecessary traffic buildup. We're also seeking the cooperation and support of all Jamaicans by imploring you to use either one of the available tip lines to report gang or other criminal activity. The Commission already mentioned the 311 tip line, and there's also 876-837-8888. This community support is a key component of our intelligence and data gathering process and rests heavily on your input and involvement. We will be doing our part by publishing bulletins and social media images and data about illicit activities and wanted men. Please help us identify these individuals so we can have a successful operation. In closing, let me reaffirm that the JDF and JCF have both the commitment and capability to achieve success here in East Kingston. We welcome the continued support that we have gotten from citizens and various other groups, including private sector, as we strive to bring a lasting peace to our communities. Thank you very much.
And now we'll have the Minister of National Security.
It is well established, as indicated by the Commissioner of Police, that the Eastern Kingston Division is home to a significant number of gangs. And even after a period of quiet, they can explode at any time. As the statistics reveal, since the fourth quarter of last calendar year into this year, there have been a major increase in the activities of these gangs, in both intra and intra-gang activity, leading to several numerous murders. The nature of these incidents demands extraordinary measures to stop the killings. Indeed, only in the last 24 hours, a teacher was killed at Vauxhall, in what was reflecting the character of the gang warfare in this particular community. The areas involved, extending from Upper Mountain View to Rockfoot and along the coastline, continue to have serious increase in murders and homicides. The government is therefore obligated to take strong steps to protect the lives of the law-abiding citizens. We appreciate the impact of the restriction on the law-abiding citizens, but these are necessary steps to protect them from the murderous minority that exists in the community. The security forces, of course, will take all of the steps required to apprehend, prosecute, and disrupt the gangs that exist in these areas. The government will continue to invest in the police force to reverse the years of neglect and to ensure that they can, in a short while, benefit and leverage the positive results coming out of these extraordinary measures. Until then, we have to continuously to take major steps to protect the lives of our citizens. And while pursuing this state of public emergency, security forces have already undertaken to look at new strategies to ensure that we can maintain the gains during these times. Evidence in particular in one of the SOE areas, in the western, one of the tri-parish areas. In St. James, where recently a quick response team was introduced, a team of highly trained mobile police officers trained to operate on motorcycles. And in their first 18 days of operation in the city areas of Montego Bay, there was not a single shooting. Since then, in the 65-day period since their introduction, there is a major reduction in homicides and shooting. In fact, we have moved from 3.98 per week of homicide to 2.15. I mention this only to indicate that the security forces continue to look at innovative and strategic ways to interrupt, disrupt, and prosecute the gangsters that continue to harass our communities and create mayhem and murder in many communities across the island. I want to reiterate the government's commitment to supporting the security services in both fiscal and in terms of resources and legislation to ensure that they can, in fact, carry out their duty effectively in ensuring this public safety. And I want to close in this short statement by again encouraging citizens to fully cooperate with the security forces. If you have difficulty in calling the special lines announced, find the security officer in your community who know the area, understand what is happening, and inform them and what is proceeding in the community. We have to remove the informal culture. We have to overcome the informal to culture-led activity. And we have seen some of this happening in a number of the areas with the tri-parish areas, which have been the longest standing areas of special security measures, where the number of firearms recovered and information flowing to our police in areas out there having a major impact on maintaining the reduction in homicide in that region. To thank you again for your presence and look forward to continued support in the activities of the security forces.
Thank you, Prime Minister, Minister, CDS, and Commissioner. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the media, we'll take your questions. Please raise your hand, identify yourself. We'll give you the microphone. You ask your question this Sunday morning. Are there any questions from members of the media this morning?
No.
We have a few, sir. All right. Let's start here.
Yes, sir. I think it would be easier if you could tell us.
I don't remember your name. Remind me of your name.
Balfour Hill.
Oh, okay.
No, I was just saying it would have been much easier for us to explain to the public where the state of emergency is. If you could give us a list of the communities that would be affected.
So we didn't use the political constituency boundaries because it doesn't cover any one constituency entirely. But remember I mentioned that the Deanery Road to Mountain View intersection is affected. And so you can imagine a line from Kingston Harbour going up Deanery Road, and then you take Mountain View, right, going up into the hills, then we go all the way out to Harbour View, Bull Bay, So it actually overlaps St. Andrew Southeastern, a bit of Kingston Eastern, a bit of Kingston Central, St. Andrew Eastern, and St. Andrew East Rural. But as I said, it covers none of those constituencies completely. So if you just imagine from Kingston Harbour up to the Deanery Road Mountain View intersection, then you go east covering Harbour View, out to Bull Bay. You get a general idea. But we have maps that you can get. And if you track the boundaries I mentioned, you'll get a better idea. It does also go out to Port Royal, I should mention.
All right, next question.
Just on that question, just so that we're, you know, the Mountain View community, all the communities along that stretch, and some communities in East Kingston and Port Royal have, that is East Kingston and Port Royal constituency. Indeed, some in Southeast St. Andrew have been, and in East Rural St. Andrew, have been problematic and have contributed in significant ways to the crime statistics, particularly murder. We are very cautious not to name communities because we know what has happened in the past, even when it is not our intention to cast a community in a bad light. So we are trying, this is part of our learning, and we are trying not to name the communities. But by virtue of the maps that are available, which we will provide, that information will obviously be filtered into the public domain. But we don't want to cast any negative aspersions or characterization of communities.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
Siobhan Campbell, Nationwide News. I have a question regarding, with so many SOEs now in effect, is there a concern that due to the manpower and resource cost, that the effect of them is actually being diluted? And another question, why not a more targeted zone of special operations in the Kingston Eastern Police Division? Why a state of public emergency?
Those are very, very good questions. I will take aspects of them. So let's start with why not a more targeted. It is not an either or. There will be more targeted operations. But as you would have seen, that before we deploy, or sometimes alongside the deployment of the states of public emergency, we also have a zone of special operations, because there are some synergies that we benefit from in having the two work together. So don't take the view that the declaration of a state of public emergency will exclude the declaration of a zone of special operations. In fact, I think I can safely say that in short order, there will be some declarations in that regard. What you're seeing here is a very calculated approach to the deployment of the states of public emergency and the zones of special operations. In other words, we do not deploy states of public emergencies and zones of special operations without having the manpower to support. We haven't said too much in the past about the recruitment and expansion of the security forces strategy, but that is well in train, particularly in the JDF, where they do a recruitment of over 300 sometimes for each intake, and that's 300 almost every 6 months. Every 3 months. Well, there you go. So we are steadily increasing the capabilities of the JDF, and I will invite the CDS to give further details if he so chooses. And in the JCF, you would have seen an article, I believe it is in today's paper or yesterday's paper, the numbers that have come wanting to join. So, you know, we are not careless in how we deploy these strategies. These are things that we have put in place 3-4 years ago, which are now beginning to bear fruit, which is increasing the capacity of the force to take on more of these operations and deployment. CDS and Commissioner, if you choose to give further explanations.
So, as the Prime Minister indicated, we have a program that allows us to get a minimum of about 300 persons into the regular force of the JDF per quarter. When we do the recruiting, we actually recruit a lot more in the Jamaica National Service Corps, because you remember there's a parallel strategy to try and engage as many of our youth, to expose them to the JDF, to give them skill sets, hard certificates that they can use in any agency that they may be engaged in, or even in the private sector. and they leave with compulsory savings, so those who don't stay can engage in other activities. But sometimes we engage up to 750 at a time in the JNSC, so that by the time we do the training and we see those who are fit to continue with military work, we usually end up with at least 300 per quarter that we can engage in the regular force. And that program will continue as long as funding is available, to get to the ideal size to maintain the levels of violence and crime that we have in the country. Thank you.
So we've particularly in last year embarked on a couple of programs. They should come into fruition anytime now. One is to expand our training facilities. We did work at the National Police College of Jamaica, and we also are opening Tranquility Bay again as a police training facility, and doing some refurbishing at Hammond Barracks in that regard. We also went through a rigorous process of training new instructors to deliver this training. They went through a rigorous selection process and training process, which included them being awarded postgraduate diplomas in law enforcement instruction and also hard qualifications in instruction. So we're making sure that whoever we train are the sort of policemen that the public would want to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Another question.
Thank you very much. Andrea Chisholm from TVJ. Prime Minister, when were you made aware of the findings of the Auditor General relating to the Caribbean Maritime University? And what's your reaction to this morning's Sunday Gleaner paper speaking about non-disclosure arrangements for members of the CMU Council?
You know, Andrea, a question such as that one clearly does not fit into the scope of this press conference. But you were Journalist of the Year a few times? A few times. So you're very seasoned at the strategies. And I appreciate that these are questions that you have to ask. I don't want to in any way dismiss the value of the question, because they are very important questions, but I would want to maintain what this press conference is about. Suffice to say that, like all Jamaicans, I was shocked that non-disclosure agreements could be used for boards, and that is something that we will have to look into very seriously. That is most unusual, and I would have to, of course, take advice as to whether or not that is permissible, and I will be doing so on Monday. This will definitely be a matter that will be raised in the Cabinet. As to my awareness, I was aware of a draft report sometime in August, but I was never given access or sight of the report. And indeed, I still, up to a few days ago, a week ago or so, I would not have had the physical report in my possession. There was an embargo placed on it, and the Permanent Secretary faithfully kept the embargo.
Thank you, sir. We have a final question, which is a follow-up from Balfour Henry.
Yes, sir. Recently, the Ministry of National Security and the police appeared before the PAAC last week, Wednesday. One of the issues that came up was the cost of the SOEs and the ZOSOs, and a certain amount of money was already in the budget to cover that. I'm wondering if with this added SOE, is that covered by the supplementary estimates, or I mean, how are you going to finance that now?
I think that we have to be very cautious how we approach discussions regarding financing security operations. Firstly, we will never give the criminals, and when I say criminals, sometimes the public might want to construe criminals as some thug on a street corner who dropped out of school at grade 9 or earlier, digging out his hand middle and having a gun in his waistband. that might be the stereotypical understanding of who a criminal is. But we are also dealing with persons, some of them are university trained. Some of them were members of the security forces. Some of them are well versed in financial matters. Some of them have training in cyber matters. And some of them are very well connected with international crime syndicates who have the capacity and the resources to hire not just well-paid attorneys and other professionals, but they have analysts who examine government strategies, find out areas of weakness, and make their plans to see where are the weak points of government strategy. And they can influence and manipulate public opinion. That is the level of criminality that exists and operates within our domain. So the Jamaican government and those people who form the leadership of the government also must improve their level of sophistication regarding discussions of matters of national security. We need to develop a culture where the parliament in the public's behalf, yes, there is the need for full information to the public, but there is also need to be careful, sometimes guarded, and the application of a higher level of judgment and understanding in the discussion of national security. Now, I wish to point out that for many years, decades even, the governments of Jamaica, or rather the administration of the government of Jamaica, the various administrations, did not find it either possible, necessary, or appropriate to increase in any significant way the national security budget. We wonder why it is that we have seen a persistent increase in the murder rate from 1980 to present. Persistent. It is not that the country has just gotten more violent. That is a part of the issue. It is not that the security forces have developed a lesser competence in crime fighting. A primary reason is that we as a country did not see it appropriate to allocate the necessary resources to fighting crime. It is almost an illogical question to ask, why is the budget increasing in national security? When it is indeed the fact that the government has sought to increase the size of both forces, to increase the capital base of the forces, meaning the acquisition of more equipment, technology, and intelligence, and improve the leadership capabilities, and investing in the particular areas of strength and response. For example, investigations, which you are now seeing leading to more cases being brought before the court. Remember that in previous decades, the reliance was on special squads. Special squads, where you could see a definite correlation to the increase in police killings. That is not our strategy. That was the plan of previous governments who find it very difficult to understand the plans, the more sophisticated, the more well thought out plans of this government. They are the ones who are saying there is no plan because they can't understand it, because all they knew to do in the 18 and a half years and the 5 years that they had was special squads. They have never made an investment in increasing the number of offshore patrol vessels that we have. They never made an investment in acquiring a maritime aircraft. They were in negotiations and talking and hoping that somebody, by virtue of charity, would have given it to us. They never made an investment in ensuring that we took up the youngsters out of the inner city, gave them an opportunity through the Jamaica National Service Corps to participate in the premier organization in this country, the JDF. to benefit from skills training. They never thought of investing in increasing the capacity of the police force in intelligence gathering, in building purpose motor vehicles with computers and tracking so that we can properly manage the fleet of the JCF and increase their capacity to respond, not just with motor vehicles, but with bikes. You would have heard praise given to the JCF regarding their quick response team. They never thought of that. All of those things are happening while at the same time we are laying a blanket strategy as it relates to states of public emergency and zones of special operations to keep the geographical areas that are giving problems under a certain level of control, while at the same time applying these general strategies of improvement in the security forces. So to question now at this point in time about the budget is to say that we shouldn't employ these strategies because they have to be paid for. And we are paying for them. We are not just talking about a plan. We have put our money where our mouth is. And I want to give you an idea of what that financing looks like. Because sometimes the hypocrisy in the discussion, the untruthfulness and the determination to carry what I carefully call fake news sometimes overtakes reason. Now, if you look on the budget for the 4 years prior to this administration, from 2012 to 2013 to 2015 to 2016, the capital budget allocated to security was $10.4 billion. In total, for 4 years. So that's on average about $2.6 billion thereabout per year. Since we have taken over the government, starting from 2016, 2017 to 2019, 2020, we have spent $41.6 billion. 41.6. In other words, we have spent in this administration 4 times what the previous administration has spent on crime. They don't have any argument to come to talk about crime fighting. They don't. Because everything that they have said about crime fighting and criticizing our strategy, they had the opportunity to do it. But they didn't. They did not dedicate the resources to it. We are dedicating the resources. We are spending 4 times what they did. And, the funny thing about it is that the crime problem for Jamaica didn't start yesterday. It didn't start 4 years ago or 8 years ago. We're looking at 4 decades of almost exponential increase in murders. 4 decades. So what we are spending now is to cover the disinvestment, meaning the lack of investment to replace equipment, technology, and personnel, and to add to that to improve relative to the increase in crime. So while crime is increasing, personnel, equipment, and intelligence is decreasing over 40 years. So what we are doing now is to catch up back and move ahead of 40 years of disinvestment in national security. When I hear the opposition and others speak, I wonder, how do they explain this? What basis do they have to raise any question about the plans of the government? And our plans have been transparent. We have been at length to explain to the country what we have been doing. Granted, it is the concepts that we are using and the plans are not always easy to understand. And we recognize that we still have to engage in explaining. But I believe there is a certain disingenuity, untruthfulness, dishonesty in the discussion about crime and violence in this country. We will have to correct 40 years of this investment, and it cannot happen overnight. It is one thing that the country will know, is that this Prime Minister and this administration will stick to the plan. Because any deviation at this point in time, except for improving the plan, and we are always open to suggestions, we are always open to bringing on board more persons and ideas. But to go and abandon our strategy would only set us back another 10 or so years. We have gone 4 years into the plan, and you are seeing the improvements. And I am confident that if we stick to the plan, you need a decade of rebuilding our national security apparatus, not only to deal with crime, because somehow the conversation about crime in Jamaica is only limited, or rather the conversation about national security is only limited to crime. Crime is only one aspect. You have to now address public order. You know, when a taximan can feel that he has the possibility of running over a policeman and getting away with it, that shows you that there is a certain lawlessness in the society, because they feel that they can commit crimes and they won't be caught. Luckily, we had invested in Jamaica eye cameras. And so you're seeing technology coming to bear. You know? So a part of the national security apparatus is to increase our technology footprint, and not just to detect crime. But a part of our national security has to do with health. It has to do with securing our ports. It has to do with securing our telecommunications. And all of that is now being done, which wasn't being done in any significant way before. The public doesn't see those operations which are happening in the background. But that is a part of the national security expenditure. The commissioner is in a better position to give you details. The public used to quarrel about police cars being parked up at bars and at all kinds of locations and not at the station. Granted, we never had enough police cars, so maybe some of the complaints weren't true. But the truth is that the management of the police fleet was always a challenge. We have invested the money in solving that. The commissioner can give you details now of what is throwing up with the tracking that you have. They've been talking about electronic station diaries now for how many years? We have invested in it, and it will come to fruition shortly. Never before has so many police stations at one time been repaired or rebuilt. Never before. So I just thought I would offload on you a little bit, because sometimes you don't respond to everything. But when you see the conversation and the narrative being created in a false and untrue way, it has to be corrected.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Commissioner, Minister, CDS, and of course we now have the Member of Parliament for Eastern St. Andrew, Mrs. Favour Williams, with us. The Permanent Secretary was also here with us, as well as SSP Lindsay. Thank you, everyone, and have a good Sunday.